"Today she dies," said the doctor. But seconds later, a bull stormed into the hospital and changed everything. What seemed like the end turned into an unbelievable twist. Watch until the end and subscribe so you don't miss how this story unfolds. The announcement from the medical team that morning was direct but without alarm. The words spoken by the most experienced professional on the ward sounded more like a statement than a sentence. "Today's the day she goes." There was nothing more to be done, according to protocols. The patient's condition had worsened over the past 72 hours. Vital signs were weak, and even palliative medications no longer provoked a response. It was an elderly woman in a semi-comatose state for weeks, admitted to room 408, whose routine was reduced to the sound of machines monitoring her slow and steady descent. The case no longer caused commotion among the professionals. Over time, it had ceased to be a clinical mystery and had become part of the hospital scenery in Oak Ridge, a small town in rural Texas where cattle ranches dotted the landscape and rodeos were still the main attraction. Only one new face, that of a newly hired nursing assistant who coincidentally was also the patient's grandson, kept a kind of silent hope alive. Ryan Miller was 26, with kind eyes that seemed older than his years. He had moved back to Oak Ridge after spending several years in Houston, trying to escape the small-town life that now seemed to call him back just as his grandmother, Elizabeth Beth Miller, was fading away. Ryan talked to her daily, even without getting any reaction, and stubbornly acted as if every word was heard. "Morning, Gran," Ryan said, entering room 408 with a gentle smile that masked his concern. "Beautiful day outside. The bluebonnets are starting to bloom early this year." Beth lay motionless, her once vibrant face now hollow and still, framed by thin white hair that Ryan carefully combed each morning. The steady beep of the heart monitor provided a monotonous backdrop to his one-sided conversations. Dr. Sarah Thompson, the head neurologist at Oak Ridge Memorial, entered the room with her usual brisk efficiency. Her face softened slightly at the sight of Ryan holding his grandmother's hand. "Ryan," she acknowledged with a small nod. "I need to check her vitals." Ryan stepped aside but remained in the room, watching as Dr. Thompson examined Beth with methodical precision. Her expression remained neutral, but Ryan had worked at the hospital long enough to read the subtle signs of resignation. "No changes?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. Dr. Thompson shook her head. "I'm sorry, Ryan. The brain scans show minimal activity. Her organs are shutting down systematically. We're making her comfortable, but you should prepare yourself." Ryan nodded, the words washing over him like a wave he'd been expecting, but still wasn't ready for. "I understand the medical reality, Dr. Thompson, but you don't know my grandmother. She's the strongest person I've ever known." Dr. Thompson's expression was sympathetic but firm. "I respect your faith in her, Ryan, but sometimes strength isn't enough." After she left, Ryan pulled a chair close to Beth's bed and sat down. From his pocket, he took out a small, worn photo, Beth in her younger days, standing proudly next to a massive black bull with a distinctive half-moon marking above its left eye. Her face was radiant, confident, a stark contrast to the frail woman before him now. "Remember this, Gran?" he whispered, though he knew she couldn't respond. "You never did tell me the whole story about this bull, said it was a tale for another day." His voice caught. "I wish we had that day now." Meanwhile, in the lateral parking lot of the hospital, a third-party company was transporting animals for a county fair in the neighboring town of Riverdale. A truck, stopped for a few minutes for emergency maintenance, was left with the rear door poorly locked, a protocol error. The time was enough for one of the animals, a large bull, to escape. The town was still sleeping, traffic was minimal, and the animal's escape went unnoticed until it appeared, rushing through the streets surrounding the hospital. Jake Simmons, the truck driver, only realized the bull was missing when he did a Final check before departing. Panic surged through him as he radioed his supervisor. "We've got a situation. The Castillo bull is loose," he reported, referring to the prized animal owned by the wealthy Castillo family, who ran the largest ranch in the county. "What do you mean, loose?" his supervisor barked back. "I mean not in the truck. The lock was faulty. He could be anywhere by now." Back in room 408, Ryan was checking Beth's IV when his colleague, Megan Foster, burst into the room. "Ryan, you're not going to believe this," she said, breathless. "There's a bull loose in the hospital." "What? That's impossible," Ryan replied, his mind struggling to process her words. The hospital's PA system crackled to life. "Attention all staff. We have a code black in the East Wing. This is not a drill. Please secure all patients and shelter in place." The sound of commotion grew louder in the hallway. Shouts, rapid footsteps, the clatter of equipment being moved. Ryan instinctively moved to stand protectively between the door and Beth's bed. "I should go help," Megan said, already backing toward the door. "Be careful," Ryan called after her as she disappeared into the corridor. The minutes that followed were tense. Ryan could hear the chaos unfolding throughout the hospital, security being called, patients being evacuated from certain areas, staff coordinating emergency protocols. He stayed by Beth's side, determined not to leave her vulnerable and alone. Then suddenly, the noise in the hallway changed. The panic seemed to shift to confusion. Ryan could hear voices expressing bewilderment rather than fear. "It's heading straight for the North Wing. Why isn't it charging? Someone call animal control." The North Wing, where room 408 was located. Ryan felt his heart rate accelerate. He moved to lock the door but stopped, a strange sense of déjà vu washing over him. The photograph, in his pocket, seemed to burn against his skin. Before he could decide what to do, the door handle turned. Ryan froze, watching in disbelief as the door slowly pushed open. In the doorway stood a massive black bull, its breathing heavy but controlled, its dark eyes scanning the room with an unnerving intelligence. Ryan's training told him to press the emergency button to create a barrier, to protect his patient. But something stopped him. On the bull's face, above its left eye, was a distinctive marking in the shape of a half moon, exactly like the one in the photograph. The bull and Ryan locked eyes for what seemed like an eternity. Then, with deliberate, careful movements, the animal entered the room. Ryan stood perfectly still, his mind racing. The bull showed no aggression. Instead, it moved with purpose toward Beth's bed. "This is impossible," Ryan whispered. The bull approached Beth's side and, with gentle precision, lowered its massive head. Ryan watched, transfixed, as the animal's muzzle touched Beth's limp hand resting on the bed. At that exact moment, the steady rhythm of the heart monitor changed. A slight acceleration, nothing alarming, but a definite change. Ryan looked from the monitor to his grandmother's face, just in time to see her eyelids flutter, the first movement they had made in weeks. Outside the room, staff were gathering, security personnel ready to intervene. Dr. Thompson pushed through the crowd, stopping short at the doorway, her face a mask of shocked disbelief at the scene before her. "Ryan!" she called out. "Get away from there!" But Ryan couldn't move, because Beth's fingers were now curling slightly, gripping the bull's muzzle in what looked unmistakably like recognition. And somewhere deep in Ryan's memory, a story his grandmother had told him years ago began to resurface. A story about a young woman, a half-moon-marked bull, and a promise that transcended ordinary understanding. The bull huffed softly, its breath warming Beth's pale skin. And for the first time in weeks, Beth Miller's lips parted, and she drew in a deep, purposeful breath of her own. Chaos erupted in the hallway, outside room 408. Security guards stood frozen at the doorway, unsure how to proceed with the unimaginable scene before them. An elderly woman seemingly connecting with a massive bull that had somehow found its way directly to her hospital room. "Nobody move," Dr. Thompson commanded, her authoritative voice cutting through the tension. "We need animal control here immediately, but everyone stay calm. Ryan, can you slowly move away from the animal?" Ryan didn't respond. His focus remained entirely on his grandmother, whose fingers were now definitely moving against the bull's muzzle. The machines monitoring Beth's vitals began to show increasing activity. Subtle changes, but impossible to ignore for medical professionals who had watched those same numbers steadily decline for weeks. "Dr. Thompson," whispered Nurse Claudia. Jenkins, pointing to the monitors, "Look at her readings." Dr. Thompson's clinical gaze shifted from the bull to the monitors, her expression transforming from concern to bewilderment. That's not possible." The bull remained perfectly still, as if understanding the importance of this moment. Its eyes, deep brown and unnervingly intelligent, never left Beth's face. The distinctive half-moon marking above its left eye seemed to glimmer under the harsh hospital lighting. Director of Hospital Security, James Murphy, arrived with 2 other guards. "We've got tranquilizers ready," he announced quietly to Dr. Thompson. "Just give the word." "Wait," Ryan finally spoke, his voice barely audible. "Look at her, she's responding to it." He turned to the security director. "Please don't do anything yet. Something's happening here." As if to confirm his words, Beth's eyelids fluttered again, more pronouncedly this time. Her chest rose with a deeper breath than she had taken in weeks. The room fell silent, except for the quickening beep of the heart monitor. Dr. Thompson, trained to follow protocols, but also to recognize extraordinary circumstances, nodded slowly. "Hold the tranquilizers, but everyone stay alert." She stepped carefully into the room, her movements slow and deliberate. "Ryan, what do you know about this?" Ryan reached into his pocket with trembling fingers and pulled out the worn photograph. "This is my grandmother, about 50 years ago, with a bull that has the exact same marking." He held it up for Dr. Thompson to see. "She used to tell stories about a special bull from her youth, but I always thought they were just tales." Before Dr. Thompson could respond, a new voice joined the conversation, gruff, authoritative, and unmistakably Texan. "That's my bull." A tall man in his 60s pushed through the crowd in the hallway. His weathered face and calloused hands spoke of a lifetime working outdoors. "Name's Jackson Castillo. That animal is Champion's Moonlight, finest breeding bull in 3 counties. He escaped from a transport to the Riverdale Fair." Jackson stopped at the doorway, his confident demeanor faltering at the sight before him. "What in the name of—" He trailed off, staring at Beth and the bull. "Mr. Castillo," Dr. Thompson addressed him, "we need to safely remove the animal without disturbing my patient." "That's no ordinary disturbance, Doc," Jackson replied, his eyes fixed on the scene. "In 30 years of raising bulls, I've never seen anything like this. This animal has never been docile a day in his life." As they spoke, the bull gently pulled away from Beth's touch and took 2 steps back, still facing her. Beth's eyes opened fully for the first time in weeks. They were cloudy, unfocused at first, but then seemed to lock onto the bull's form. "Moon." The word was barely audible, a whisper from cracked lips unused to speaking, but it sent a jolt through the room. "Gran?" Ryan rushed to her side, taking her hand. "Gran, can you hear me?" Beth's eyes slowly shifted from the bull to her grandson. Recognition dawned gradually on her face. "Ryan," she managed, her voice like dry leaves rustling. Dr. Thompson moved quickly to check Beth's vitals directly, professionally masking her astonishment. "Mrs. Miller, you're at Oak Ridge Memorial Hospital. Don't try to speak too much yet." Behind them, the bull remained unnaturally calm, watching. Jackson Castillo approached it cautiously, rope in hand. "Easy now, Moonlight. Easy, boy." To everyone's surprise, the massive animal allowed itself to be secured without resistance. As Jackson prepared to lead it out, Beth's raspy voice stopped him. "Wait!" The words seemed to take all her strength. "The marking, not moonlight." Jackson frowned. "Ma'am, I've owned this bull since he was a calf. Champion's Moonlight, registered and papered." Beth's head moved slightly in what might have been a shake. "Crescendo," she whispered. "His name is Crescendo." The bull's head lifted at the sound of the name, ears pricking forward. Jackson's face drained of color. How could you possibly know that name? That was his sire's line, generations back. Nobody uses that name anymore. Ryan looked from his grandmother to the rancher. "Mr. Castillo, my grandmother used to work with bulls when she was younger. She has a picture with one that looks exactly like yours, same marking and everything." "Impossible," Jackson muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. "That would be 50 years ago at least." 53, Beth whispered, her strength seeming to build with each word. "Crescendo, my Crescendo." The hospital room, already tense with the bizarre situation, now filled with a new kind of bewilderment. Dr. Thompson, attempting to maintain professional focus, continued checking Beth's responses, but even she couldn't hide her amazement at the rapid improvement in her patient's condition. "Her neural responses are improving by the minute," she announced, the clinical observation barely masking her disbelief. "This is unprecedented." News of the bull in the hospital and the miraculous awakening spread through the facility like wildfire. Staff members not directly involved found excuses to pass by room 408, hoping for a glimpse of what many were already calling the miracle in 408. Hospital Administrator Gregory Hayes arrived, his face twisted with concern. "This is completely unacceptable. That animal needs to be removed immediately. We have protocols." "With all due respect, Mr. Hayes," Dr. Thompson interrupted, "we're witnessing something medically extraordinary. Mrs. Miller was non-responsive less than an hour ago. Her brain scans showed minimal activity, consistent with imminent failure. And now," she gestured to Beth, who was now tracking movements with her eyes and squeezing Ryan's hand. Hayes looked from the doctor to the patient to the bull, which was standing calmly with Jackson holding its lead. His administrative objections battled with human curiosity on his face. "Fine, you have 1 hour to sort this out, then that animal leaves the premises, and I want signed waivers from everyone involved." As Hayes departed, Jackson approached Beth's bedside, studying her face intently. "You look familiar, ma'am. What did you say your name was?" "Elizabeth Miller," Ryan answered for his grandmother. "But everyone calls her Beth. She grew up around here, then moved to Houston after she married my grandfather." Jackson's eyes widened. "Not Beth Wilson? From the Wilson Ranch out on Cottonwood Creek?" Beth's eyes sparkled with a hint of their old light. "Wilson," she confirmed weakly. The rancher removed his hat, holding it respectfully against his chest. "My father bought that property from your family back in '69. He used to talk about the Wilson girl who had a way with bulls like nobody he'd ever seen." He glanced at the bull, particularly one bull. Ryan felt a chill run down his spine. "The bull in the photograph." Jackson nodded slowly. "The original Crescendo, my father's prize bull. The story goes that he would only perform in the rodeo for one person." "Me," Beth whispered. "Only me." Outside the room, more hospital staff had gathered, along with local police who had been called when the bull was first reported. Word was spreading beyond the hospital now. Someone had captured video on a phone, and despite hospital policy against such recordings, it was already circulating on local social media. Dr. Thompson, aware of the growing spectacle, made a decision. "We need to move Mrs. Miller to the intensive care unit for proper monitoring and," she added, looking at the bull, "we need a controlled way to continue this interaction if it's indeed contributing to her recovery." Ryan looked up hopefully. "You mean you're not separating them?" From a medical perspective, I can't explain what's happening, but I can't deny the results either, Dr. Thompson replied. Whatever connection exists between your grandmother and this animal appears to be stimulating neurological activity we thought was permanently lost. Jackson Castillo cleared his throat. My ranch is only 3 miles from here. We have facilities that could accommodate both Mrs. Miller and the bull safely. He looked around at the crowded hospital corridor. Away from all this commotion, the suggestion hung in the air, unprecedented and against every medical protocol, yet strangely compelling given the extraordinary circumstances. Before anyone could respond, Beth's voice rose again, stronger than before. The promise, she said, her gaze fixed on the bull. He remembered the promise. The next 48 hours transformed Oak Ridge Memorial Hospital. Room 408 became the epicenter of what the local newspaper was already calling the miracle of Oak Ridge, despite the hospital administration's attempts to control the narrative. A small army of specialists had arrived from Houston and Dallas, drawn by reports of the inexplicable recovery and the bizarre circumstances surrounding it. Beth Miller had been moved to a private room in the rehabilitation wing with security, posted outside to manage the growing number of curious visitors and journalists. Her vital signs continued to improve at a rate that defied medical explanation. Even more remarkably, her cognitive functions were returning, slowly but unmistakably. Ryan sat by her bedside, watching as Dr. Thompson conducted yet another series of tests. The neurologist's initial skepticism had given way to cautious vaccination. Your grandmother's neural pathways are regenerating, she explained to Ryan, showing him the latest brain scans. It's as if they're being reminded how to function. I've never seen anything like it. And you still think it's connected to the bull? Ryan asked, though he already knew the answer. He had witnessed the change himself. How Beth seemed. Most alert, most present after her daily visits with the animal. Through an unprecedented arrangement, Champion's Moonlight, or Crescendo, as Beth insisted on calling him, was being kept in a makeshift enclosure on the hospital grounds. Jackson Castillo had personally overseen its construction, ensuring it met both the bull's needs and safety regulations. Twice daily, weather permitting, Beth was wheeled out to the enclosure for what the medical staff clinically termed animal in therapy sessions, but what Ryan recognized as something far more profound. Dr. Thompson tucked her tablet under her arm. Science demands I maintain skepticism, but the correlation is undeniable. Your grandmother's brain activity spikes dramatically during and after these encounters. She lowered her voice. Between us, I've started recording the sessions for a paper I'm considering writing. As soon as the doctor left, Beth's eyes fluttered open. Though still weakened, her gaze had a lucidity that grew stronger each day. Ryan, she said, her voice gaining strength, I need to tell you about Crescendo. Ryan pulled his chair closer, taking her frail hand in his. I'm listening, Gran. Beth's eyes drifted to the window, through which the temporary enclosure was just visible. He was never just an animal to me. From the moment I first saw him as a calf, there was a connection. She paused, gathering strength. Your great-grandfather. Thought I was crazy. Girls didn't work with the rodeo bulls, but Crescendo wouldn't perform for anyone else. Like Mr. Castillo said, the story about a bull that would only perform for one person. Beth nodded weakly. For 3 years, we traveled the Texas rodeo circuit. Made quite a name for ourselves. A faint smile touched her lips. Then came the accident. Accident, Ryan prompted when she fell silent. At the State Fair of Texas, a stage collapsed during a thunderstorm. I was trapped underneath. Her voice grew distant with memory. Everyone thought I was gone. Even the doctors gave up. But Crescendo broke free from his pen that night. Somehow found me in the medical tent. Her eyes refocused on Ryan. He stood over me until I woke up, just like now. Ryan felt a chill. Gran, that's impossible. She managed a small laugh. So they all said then too. Before Ryan could respond, there was a knock at the door. Jackson Castillo stood in the doorway, his weathered face solemn beneath his cowboy hat. Mr. Castillo, Ryan acknowledged. Come in. The rancher entered, nodding respectfully to Beth. Mrs. Miller, you're looking stronger today. Thanks to your bull, she replied. Jackson shifted uncomfortably. That's partly why I'm here. I've been going through some old records from when my father first acquired the Wilson Ranch. He pulled a yellowed folder from inside his jacket. Found something that might interest you both. He carefully laid out several old photographs and documents on the bedside table. Ryan leaned forward, instantly recognizing his grandmother's youthful face in the faded images. She stood proudly next to a magnificent bull with the distinctive half-moon marking. Images similar to the one Ryan had carried, but from different events, different years. My father kept everything, Jackson explained. He was fascinated by the story of Beth Wilson and her bull. He pointed to a newspaper clipping with the headline, Miracle Recovery, Rodeo Star Awakens After Bull's Vigil. Ryan picked up the clipping, reading portions aloud. Doctors at Dallas Memorial are calling it unexplainable. Beth Wilson, 19, pronounced critical after stage collapse. Prize bull broke containment, found standing guard over unconscious rider. Wilson awoke hours later against all medical predictions. He looked up at his grandmother, whose eyes were fixed on the old photographs. You never told me any of this. Some stories are hard to tell, she replied softly. People don't believe what they can't explain. Jackson cleared his throat. There's more. My father bought not just the ranch, but the breeding rights to Crescendo. The bloodline has been in our family ever since. He tapped another document, a breeding chart showing generations of bulls descending from the original Crescendo. Champion's Moonlight is his direct descendant, 5 generations removed. But that doesn't explain how he knew where to find my grandmother, Ryan said. Or how he got into the hospital and straight to her room. No, Jackson agreed, it doesn't. A silence fell over the room as the three contemplated the implications. It was Beth who finally broke it. The promise, she said, her voice suddenly clearer than it had been since awakening. The day I sold the ranch, the day I had to leave Crescendo behind, I made him a promise. Tears formed in her eyes. I told him if I ever needed him again, truly needed him, he would know, and he would come. Jackson's expression remained neutral, though Ryan could see the rancher was struggling with the concept. Mrs. Miller, with all due respect, bulls don't understand human promises. Don't they? Beth challenged, a spark of her former spirit flashing. Then how do you explain what happened here? Before Jackson could respond, Ryan's colleague Megan appeared at the door, her face flushed with excitement. Ryan, you won't believe this. There's a patient in the cancer ward, Mr. Peterson, stage 4, given weeks to live. This morning, he started improving after being moved to the room next to your grandmother's old room. His numbers are already up by 15%. Ryan exchanged a glance with his grandmother. Just like that, no other changes in treatment. Megan shook her head. None. Dr. Warner is completely baffled. It's like what happened with your grandmother is somehow affecting other patients. Jackson stood abruptly. I should check on Moonlight. He gathered the documents, leaving only the newspaper clipping. You keep that one. Seems like it belongs with you folks. After he left, Ryan turned to Megan. What else is happening around here? Anything unusual besides Mr. Peterson? Megan lowered her voice, though they were alone in the room. Staff are talking. Nurse Jenkins says she had a dream about your grandmother last night, said she saw her walking through a field of bluebonnets, looking young and strong. Woke up crying. She hesitated. And the night janitor swears he saw hoofprints appearing in the hallway outside room 408, even after they'd just been mopped clean. Beth's hand tightened around Ryan's. It's not just about me and Crescendo anymore, she whispered. It never was. That evening, as Ryan was helping his grandmother prepare for dinner, Dr. Thompson returned with another doctor, an older man with kind eyes and a distinguished bearing. "Mrs. Miller, this is Dr. Richard Keller from Johns Hopkins," she introduced. "He specializes in cases that challenge conventional medical understanding." Dr. Keller approached Beth with genuine warmth. "Mrs. Miller, your case is extraordinary. Dr. Thompson has shared your scans with me, and I must say, the neural regeneration you're experiencing should be impossible according to everything we currently understand about brain function in comatose impatience." Beth regarded him calmly. "Yet here I am." "Indeed," he smiled. "Would you permit me to ask you a few questions about your experience, both the current one and the incident from your youth?" Beth nodded, and for the next hour she recounted her story in greater detail than she had with Ryan. The special bond with the original Crescendo, their rise to fame on the rodeo circuit, the accident that nearly claimed her life, and the bull's unexplained appearance at her bedside that first time. "After that recovery, did you experience any unusual abilities or sensations?" Dr. Keller asked. Beth was quiet for a moment. "I always knew when animals were in distress," she finally said. "Could feel it somehow. And sometimes, when I touched people who were sick, they'd tell me they felt better afterward." She shrugged slightly. "Nothing dramatic, just little things that could be explained away." Dr. Keller nodded thoughtfully. "And what about dreams? Any recurring dreams over the years?" "The field," Beth said immediately. "Always the same field, with blue bonnets and Indian paintbrushes, and Crescendo waiting at the edge." Ryan started. "Just like Nurse Jenkins's dream," he murmured. "Doctor." Keller's eyes lit with interest. "Someone else dreamed of this field?" As Ryan explained about the nurse's dream and the other strange occurrences in the hospital, Beth closed her eyes, suddenly looking exhausted. "I think that's enough for today," Dr. Thompson intervened. "Mrs. Miller needs her rest." As the doctors prepared to leave, Beth's eyes opened once more. "Dr. Keller," she called softly, "the field in my dreams, it's real. It's on the old Wilson Ranch, where our house used to stand, where I made my promise to Crescendo." After the doctors departed, Ryan sat in the growing twilight with his grandmother. Outside, a gentle rain began to fall, pattering against the window. "Gran," he said carefully, "do you think we should visit the old ranch? See this field for ourselves?" Beth turned to him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I've been afraid to all these years. Afraid of what I'd feel, but now—" She reached for his hand. "Now, I think we must." The old Wilson Ranch lay 7 miles outside of Oak Ridge, nestled in a valley that had changed little in the 50 years since Beth had called it home. Ryan drove slowly down the gravel road, acutely aware of his grandmother beside him. Though still weak, Beth had insisted on making this journey, and Dr. Thompson had reluctantly approved a brief excursion, provided Ryan monitored her carefully. "It looks smaller," Beth murmured as they approached the property. The main house had been rebuilt by the Castillos years ago, but the iconic red barn still stood, weathered but proud against the Texas sky. Jackson Castillo was waiting for them at the gate, his truck parked nearby. He had been surprisingly supportive of their visit, even offering to give them a private tour of the grounds. Ryan suspected the rancher was as intrigued by the mystery as they were. "Mrs. Miller," Jackson greeted, helping Beth from the car into the wheelchair Ryan had brought. "Welcome back to your old home." Beth's eyes roamed the landscape hungrily, taking in the familiar contours of hills and trees. "The field," she said without preamble. "I need to see the field." Jackson nodded, as if expecting this request. "I know exactly." "Which one you mean? My father never developed that piece of land, said it had a special feeling to it that shouldn't be disturbed." He led them down a path that wound behind the barn, Ryan carefully navigating the wheelchair over the uneven ground. As they crested a small rise, the field opened up before them. 5 acres of gently rolling land, bordered by oak trees. In the late spring sunlight, it was carpeted with bluebonnets and Indian paintbrushes, exactly as Beth had described from her dreams. Beth's breath caught audibly. "It hasn't changed at all. We protect this field," Jackson explained. "Never implow it, never graze it. Local legend says it's blessed somehow." He glanced at Beth. "My father believed the legend was connected to you and that bull." Ryan positioned the wheelchair at the edge of the field, where Beth could take in the full panorama. "Is this where you made your promise to Crescendo?" Beth nodded, tears forming in her eyes. "Right here. The day I had to leave." She pointed to a massive oak at the far edge of the field. "We stood under that tree. I was 19, newly married to your grandfather, moving to Houston for his job." Her voice grew distant with memory. "Crescendo knew something was changing. Bulls sense these things. He followed me all the way to this spot and wouldn't go back to the pen." Jackson removed his hat, holding it respectfully. "My father told me stories about that bull's behavior after you left. Said he would come to this field every day at sunset and just stand, looking toward the horizon." "East," Beth whispered, "toward Houston." Ryan knelt beside his grandmother's wheelchair. "What exactly did you promise him, Gran?" "Yibri." Beth was quiet for a long moment, her eyes fixed on the distant oak tree. "I promised that our connection would never be broken, no matter the distance, that if ever one of us needed the other desperately enough, we would know, and we would come." She turned to look at Ryan, her eyes suddenly clear and intent. "I promised that not even passing would separate us truly." A shiver ran through Ryan despite the warm day. And now, generations later, his descendant remembered, Beth finished. "Blood remembers, Ryan. Some bonds transcend ordinary understanding." Jackson cleared his throat. "Mrs. Miller, there's something I haven't told you about Champion's moonlight." "Why?" When both Millers looked at him questioningly, he continued. "The day before he escaped and found you at the hospital, he was acting strangely, agitated, wouldn't eat, kept looking eastward, just like my father described the original Crescendo doing." "Toward the hospital," Ryan murmured. "Yes," Jackson confirmed. "And here's the thing. According to our transport schedule, he wasn't even supposed to be on that truck. There was a last-minute change that put him on that specific route, passing by Oak Ridge Memorial. The odds against it all." He shook his head wordlessly. Beth reached out, touching the blue bonnets nearest her wheelchair. "Not odds, purpose." As the three fell silent, contemplating the implications, a soft whicker sounded from beyond the tree line. Ryan turned to see Champions, Moonlight being led toward them by one of Jackson's ranch hands. The bull moved with the same deliberate calm he had shown in the hospital, his dark eyes fixed on Beth. "I hope you don't mind," Jackson said. "Thought he should be part of this homecoming." Beth's face lit up at the sight of the bull. "Bring him closer, please." The ranch hand led the massive animal to within a few yards of where they stood. Without hesitation, the bull approached Beth's wheelchair, lowering his great head to her level. The half-moon marking above his eye seemed to shimmer in the sunlight. Beth reached out a trembling hand to touch his broad forehead. "Hello, old friend," she whispered. Ryan watched in amazement as his grandmother and the bull regarded each other with what could only be described as mutual recognition. There was a tangible energy between them, almost visible in the golden afternoon light. "Mr. Castillo," Ryan said quietly, "you've worked with bulls all your life. Have you ever seen anything like this?" Jackson shook his head slowly. "Never, and I've seen some strong bonds between handlers and animals. But this is something else entirely." As they watched, a remarkable change came over Beth. Her posture straightened, her breathing deepened, and a flush of color returned to her cheeks. It was as if the proximity to both the bull and this special place was physically strengthening her. "I want to stand," she announced suddenly. "Gran, I don't think..." Ryan began, concerned. "Help me stand, Ryan," she repeated with quiet authority. "Here in this field, I need to stand." After exchanging a worried glance with Jackson, Ryan carefully supported his grandmother as she rose from the wheelchair. Her legs trembled with the effort, but she remained upright, one hand on Ryan's arm, the other still touching the bull's forehead. "Do you feel it?" she asked, her voice stronger than it had been since her awakening. "The energy in this place?" Ryan was about to respond when he realized that he did feel something, a subtle vibration, a warmth that seemed to rise from the ground itself. He had attributed it to the emotion of the moment, but now he wondered. The local Comanche had a name for this area, Jackson offered unexpectedly. "My father researched it years ago. They called it the place where spirits touch." Beth nodded, unsurprised. They knew. She took a small step forward, then another, still supported by Ryan, but moving with increasing confidence. "Every living thing is connected, Ryan. Most people forget how to feel it, but animals remember. And sometimes, in special places like this, with special bonds like ours," she gestured between herself and the bull, "the connection becomes visible to everyone." As if in response to her words, the bull gently pulled away and walked several paces into the field of bluebonnets. There, he turned to face them, standing proudly amidst the sea of blue flowers, exactly as he appeared in Beth's dreams. Beth's grip on Ryan's arm tightened. "This is what I see every night in my dreams, this exact moment." The afternoon light caught the bull's half-moon marking, making it gleam like a crescent moon against his dark hide. A gentle breeze rippled through the bluebonnets, creating waves of blue and purple. "Gran," Ryan said softly, "the doctors at the hospital, they're saying your recovery is unprecedented. That medically it shouldn't be possible." Beth smiled, her eyes never leaving the bull. "Medicine understands the body, Ryan, but there are other forces at work in healing." She turned to face him fully. "When I was trapped under that collapsed stage 53 years ago, the doctor said the same thing. Said I should have passed, but Crescendo came, just as he promised, and pulled me back." "But how?" Ryan asked, the scientist in him still struggling with concepts beyond rational explanation. Beth's answer was simple. Love, Ryan, the purest form of connection between living souls. Jackson, who had been silent during this exchange, suddenly pointed to the ground near their feet. "Look," he said, his voice uncharacteristically awed. Where Beth had stood, tiny white flowers were pushing up through the soil, not bluebonnets or paintbrushes, but delicate blooms none of them recognized. As they watched, the flowers opened fully, their petals forming perfect crescent shapes. Moonflowers, Beth identified them. They only bloom at dusk or in the presence of their namesake. She looked up at the clear afternoon sky, where no moon was visible, or when the veil between worlds grows thin. Ryan felt a profound shift in his understanding, as if pieces of a puzzle were finally aligning. The other patients at the hospital who are improving, the dreams staff are having, the hoof prints appearing and disappearing. Beth nodded. It's not just about me and Crescendo. Once such a connection is reawakened, it creates ripples, healing ripples that touch others. As the sun began to lower toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the field, Beth took another step forward and another, gradually moving away from Ryan's support. She walked slowly but steadily toward the bull, who waited patiently amidst the flowers. "Gran, be careful," Ryan called, concerned about her still fragile state. "I'm stronger here than anywhere else," she replied without turning. When she reached the bull, she placed both hands on his massive shoulders, leaning against him slightly. The animal remained perfectly still, supporting her weight. From this position, Beth looked back at Ryan and Jackson. "There's something you should know," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the field. "The night before, I fell into the coma. I dreamed of Crescendo more vividly than ever before. He was calling me to this field. I think—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. I think my spirit was already wandering, already preparing to leave, but there was unfinished business. What business? Ryan asked, moving closer. A promise unfulfilled. The promise that this connection would never die. She stroked the bull's neck gently. I needed to show someone else before I go, someone who would understand and remember. A chill ran through Ryan despite the warm evening. Gran, don't talk like that. You're recovering. The doctors are amazed by your progress. Beth smiled gently. I've been given a gift, Ryan. Extra time to set things right, to pass on what I know. She looked meaningfully at him. To you. 6 months had passed since the day Beth Wilson Miller had awakened in room 408. Oak Ridge Memorial Hospital had become something of a pilgrimage site, with people traveling from across the country to visit what local newspapers now called the Miracle Wing. Though hospital administrators had initially resisted the attention, they eventually embraced their institution's new reputation, establishing a research center dedicated to the study of unexplained recoveries and animal-assisted healing. Ryan stood in the doorway of the small farmhouse he had purchased on the edge of the old Wilson property. Through the window, he could see his grandmother sitting on the porch, her silver hair gleaming in the autumn sunlight as she worked on her memoir. At 73, Beth was healthier than she'd been in years, not just recovered from her near-passing experience, but rejuvenated in ways that continued to baffle her doctors. Dr. Thompson had documented every aspect of Beth's remarkable recovery, publishing a groundbreaking paper that had the medical community both fascinated and skeptical. Neurological regeneration. Following emotional stimulus, the Miller case had become required reading in several medical schools, despite its controversial conclusions about the potential role of animal connection in healing. Ryan checked his watch and stepped outside. Gran, it's almost time. Jackson will be here soon. Beth looked up from her writing and smiled. Is everything ready at the field? Just as you asked, Ryan assured her. After Beth's improved health had stabilized, Ryan had made the decision to move back to Oak Ridge permanently. With his medical background and newfound interest in alternative healing, he had accepted a position at the hospital's new research center. The purchase of the small farmhouse on the edge of the Castillo property, close to the special field of bluebonnets, had been the final piece in their new beginning. The sound of tires on gravel announced Jackson's arrival. The rancher had become a close friend in the months following Beth's recovery, equally invested in understanding the mysterious connection between his prize bull and the Wilson family legacy. Everything's set, Jackson called as he climbed out of his truck. Moonlight's already waiting in the field. Beth closed her notebook and stood, moving with a grace that belied her recent medical history. Then, we shouldn't keep him waiting. The three made their way down the familiar path to the bluebonnet field. Though the flowers weren't in bloom this late in the year, the field still held its special atmosphere, a quietness that seemed to exist outside ordinary time. Champions. Moonlight stood beneath the great oak tree, his half-moon marking as distinctive as ever. He knows, Beth said simply as they approached. Ryan nodded. In the months since his grandmother's recovery, he had witnessed enough inexplicable events to abandon much of his medical skepticism. The bull's behavior, his seeming awareness of significant moments, his calm demeanor when Beth was near, his apparent understanding of human emotions, defied conventional explanation. What they were about to do today defied convention even further. Are you sure about this, Gran? Ryan asked one final time. Beth's eyes were clear and determined. More sure than I've been about anything in my life. At Beth's request, a small gathering had assembled at the far edge of the field. Dr. Thompson and Dr. Keller, who had continued to document Beth's case, Megan and Nurse Jenkins from the hospital, a handful of patients who had experienced their own unexpected recoveries in the wake of Beth's awakening, and a local journalist who had been given exclusive access to the story, on the condition that she approach it with an open mind. "Ready when you are, Mrs. Miller," Jackson said, holding the specially designed harness they had prepared. With Ryan's help, Beth secured the harness around her waist. It connected to a similar harness fitted to Champion's Moonlight, not for control, but for support. What they were about to attempt would have seemed ludicrous 6 months ago. Beth, who had been on the verge of passing in a hospital bed, was going to ride the bull once more, not in a rodeo setting, not as a spectacle, but as the completion of a circle that had begun over 50 years ago. "Remember what Dr. Thompson said?" Ryan cautioned. "Just a gentle walk around the perimeter, no strain on your heart." Beth smiled at her grandson's concern. "I'll be fine, Ryan. Some things strengthen the heart rather than strain it." With Jackson's assistance, Beth mounted the bull using a small platform they had constructed. Once seated, she adjusted herself comfortably, her hands finding their natural position as if no time had passed since her rodeo days. Champion's Moonlight stood perfectly still throughout the process, his breathing steady and calm. "There's something I need to tell you both," Beth said once she was settled. "Something I've been waiting for the right moment to share." Ryan and Jackson moved closer, aware that whatever Beth was about to reveal was meant for their ears alone, before the demonstration for the waiting observers began. "The night I fell into the coma," Beth began, her voice soft but clear, "I had already begun to cross over. I felt myself leaving, felt the lightness and peace that comes with release." She stroked the bull's neck gently, but then I heard him calling. Not Moonlight here, but the original crescendo, somehow across time and space, and whatever separates this world from the next, he was calling me back. Ryan took her hand. "Gran, let me finish, dear. It's important you understand." Her eyes were distant now, seeing beyond the present moment. "I followed his call and found myself in this field, but it wasn't quite the same field we know. It was brighter, more vivid, as if seen through different eyes. And there were others there, animals I had known and loved throughout my life, yes, but also people." Jackson shifted uncomfortably, but remained respectfully silent. "Your grandfather was there, Ryan, and my parents, and others I had loved, who had gone before me." Beth's voice remained steady, matter-of-fact. "They weren't sad or ghostly. They were vibrant, real, more alive than I had ever known them, and they told me it wasn't my time yet, that I had one more task to complete in this world." "What task?" Ryan asked softly. Beth looked directly at him, her gaze suddenly intense. "To show you, both of you, that the connections we forge in life are never truly broken. That love, once created, continues to exist, binding us together, across time and space, and even across the boundary between life and death." She touched the half-moon marking above the bull's eye. "This marking isn't just a coincidence passed down through genetics. It's a symbol, a sign of recognition, a way for souls to find each other again." Ryan thought of all he had witnessed in the past 6 months. The inexplicable healing, the shared dreams, the flowers that bloomed out of season, the patients who improved simply by being near the room where Beth and the bull had reconnected. "Believe you, Gran," he said simply. Beth nodded, satisfied. "I know you do. That's why you're the one who needs to carry this forward when I'm gone. Not in fear or sadness, but in the certainty that connections like these never die." She straightened her back and took a deep breath. "Now, let's give our audience the show they came for." With the slightest pressure from her knees, Beth signaled to Champion's Moonlight. The bull began to move, a slow, dignified walk around the perimeter of the field. The gathered observers applauded spontaneously at the sight, the elderly woman seated confidently on the massive animal, moving together in perfect harmony. Ryan walked alongside, ready to assist if needed, but it quickly became apparent that Beth needed no help. Decades melted away as muscle memory took over, her posture relaxed, yet authoritative. The bull responded to her subtle cues without hesitation, their connection visible to everyone watching. Dr. Thompson shook her head in amazement. "Medically impossible," she murmured to Dr. Keller beside her. 6 months ago, her muscles had atrophied to the point where sitting upright was challenging. "Yet here she is," Dr. Keller replied. "Perhaps we need to expand our definition of possible." As Beth and Moonlight completed their circuit of the field, something extraordinary began to happen. Despite the season, tiny shoots of bluebonnets began to emerge from the soil in their wake, unfurling and blooming in accelerated time. A murmur of astonishment passed through the observers. "Are you seeing this?" the journalist whispered, frantically taking photos. By the time Beth and the bull returned to their starting point, a path of vibrant bluebonnets traced their journey. Around the field, blooming months out of season, defying natural law. Beth dismounted with Jackson's help, her face flushed with exhilaration. "Thank you, my friend," she said to the bull, pressing her forehead briefly against his. As the small crowd surged forward with questions and exclamations, Beth turned to Ryan. "Now, do you understand what needs to be preserved here? This field, this connection, this knowledge?" Ryan nodded, finally grasping the full significance of what his grandmother had been trying to teach him. "I'll protect it, Gran. I promise." Later, that evening, after the visitors had departed and Beth had retired to rest, Ryan sat on the porch of their new home, contemplating all that had occurred. Jackson joined him, 2 glasses of whiskey in hand. "Your grandmother is quite a woman," the rancher said, passing a glass to Ryan. "Always has been," Ryan agreed, "though I never truly understood how special until now." They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching as the moon rose over the distant field, a perfect half-moon mirroring the marking on Champion's moonlight. "What will you do with the research center?" Jackson finally asked. "After today you'll have more attention than ever." Ryan had been pondering this question himself. "Study the connection," he answered. "Not just between my grandmother and your bull, but the ripple effects we've been seeing in other patients. There's something happening here that could change our entire understanding of healing." "And the field," Jackson pressed, "those flowers that bloomed out of season?" Ryan smiled. "Some things aren't meant to be studied under microscopes, Mr. Castillo. Some things are just meant to be protected and respected." He raised his glass slightly. "Which is why I'm grateful we'll be neighbors for the foreseeable future. That field needs both our families watching over it." Jackson nodded, understanding the deeper meaning behind Ryan's words. The Wilson Castillo connection would continue, just as the bond between Beth and Crescendo had transcended generations. In the weeks that followed, Beth's story spread far beyond Oak Ridge. The medical community remained divided, some dismissing the case as anecdotal, others intrigued by the possibilities it presented. But for those who witnessed the events firsthand, who saw Beth ride Champion's moonlight around a field that bloomed impossibly in her wake, no scientific explanation was necessary. The research center flourished under Ryan's direction, documenting cases of unexpected recoveries and studying the therapeutic effects of deep animal-human connections. Beth continued to improve, defying all medical predictions about her longevity, though she often reminded Ryan that when her time truly came, he shouldn't mourn. "Remember what I showed you," she would say. "Connections that strong never really break." On the 1-year anniversary of Beth's miraculous awakening in room 408, a small ceremony was held in the Blue Bonnet Field. A plaque was placed beneath the great oak tree, commemorating not just Beth's recovery, but the profound mystery that had touched so many lives. As Beth stood before the gathering to speak, Champion's moonlight by her side without restraint or handler, she embodied the very connection she had tried to explain. Woman and animal, past and present, ordinary and extraordinary, all boundaries dissolved in the presence of something deeper than rational understanding. "We are all connected," she began, her voice carrying across the hushed field. "To each other, to the animals who share our journey, to this earth that sustains us. Sometimes we forget this truth, caught up in the business of modern living. But in special moments, in special places, with special bonds," she laid her hand on the bull's broad forehead, fingers tracing the half-moon marking. "We remember." Ryan watched his grandmother, struck by how the journey had transformed them both. He had arrived at Oak Ridge a year ago as a pragmatic healthcare worker, returning reluctantly to a hometown he'd been eager to escape. Now he stood as the guardian of a mystery, the protector of a legacy that defied conventional explanation. As the ceremony concluded and people began to disperse, Beth approached Ryan with a small leather-bound journal in her hands. "This is for you," she said, placing it in his palms. "My complete story. Everything I experienced, everything I saw. On the other side, everything I came back to tell you." Her eyes were clear and peaceful. "When I'm gone, this will help you understand. And someday, when the right person comes along, it will help you explain." Ryan accepted the journal, recognizing it as both gift and responsibility. "How will I know who the right person is?" Beth smiled, the same smile that had greeted him every day of his childhood, now infused with a wisdom that transcended ordinary knowledge. "You'll know," she said simply. "Just as Crescendo knew where to find me, just as Moonlight knew where to find us both." She looked out over the field where bluebonnets swayed gently in the breeze. "Some connections are written in the stars, Ryan. All we have to do is remember how to read them." As twilight fell over Oak Ridge, the special field glowed with an inner light that couldn't be explained by the setting sun alone. And if anyone had been watching very carefully, they might have noticed the half-moon marking on Champion's Moonlight's face, shimmering with that same light. A beacon, a cross. Time, a promise kept, a circle completed. Dear listeners, we hope Elizabeth and Ryan's extraordinary journey has touched your hearts. The bond they shared with Champion's Moonlight reminds us that some connections transcend our ordinary understanding, whether between humans and animals or between loved ones across the boundaries of time and space. If this story resonated with you, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Every day we bring you unique narratives that explore life's profound mysteries and unexpected moments of connection. Join our community of storytellers and listeners who believe that the most powerful tales are those that remind us we're all part of something greater than ourselves. What connections in your life have seemed to defy explanation? Share your stories in the comments below. You never know whose heart your experience might touch. Until our next journey together, remember that the bonds we forge in life create ripples that continue long after we can see them.